Hey folks, Cam here from Ryuken Sport Fishing. We're here at the Ryuken Pro Shop here in Okinawa, Japan. We're going to do a little video for you guys today on some rod repair we're doing from one of our customers that brought a rod in. The rod the customer brought in is a Japanese-made Alpha Tackle rod. It's an 80-pound rod built on a full fiberglass blank. The customer had come in and specifically requested for us not to change any of the original components, not to remove any of the original wrapping. They simply wanted the epoxy to be redone around the threads and the footing of the guides. So we're going to take you over to our CRB rod table over here, and we're going to break down and show you how we re-epoxy that rod. We've already gone through and prepped this rod. We removed some of the blemishes that were on it, some of the old epoxy that was dry and cracked and brittle. We removed that. We've already gone ahead and taped this into the EVA foam grip to keep any epoxy off of that. And we're going to go ahead and mix up some epoxy and go ahead and get this rod fixed for this customer. All right, folks, so we're back. We're over here at our CRB rod drying table over here. This is where I do all of our rod building and repair. We're gonna show you what we did here. So we've mixed up 1-to-1 ratios of epoxy here. We specifically use Pro Coat. It's one of the CRB products that we use here. We've got a resin 1-to-1 with a hardener. We mix ours specifically here in our CRB epoxy mixer. You can see it running here. I prefer the epoxy mixer just because it reduces the amount of bubbles that I have to deal with when I'm putting on epoxy. If you're somebody who doesn't necessarily have this amount of gear or whatnot, you can always mix your epoxy in a cup, stir it up, and to dissipate all of those bubbles, you just keep a heat gun on your table like I do. Anytime I'm doing epoxy, you can take heat, apply it to your epoxy in the cup there. The heat's gonna allow it to thin out a little bit and allow those bubbles to rise up and pop. You wanna try to reduce the amount of bubbles that you have in your epoxy throughout the entire time that you're applying it to the rod. So we're gonna go ahead and put some epoxy on this rod for you. We're gonna show you how to do a few of these guides here and try and show you what it is we're going for the customer in his request here. And then we'll go down the rod and then eventually we'll get to a stopping point where we'll allow the rod to dry and cure. We're here ultimately is to get it on there nice and even so that it comes out nice and even throughout the whole rod. I'll start here on this guide, and as you can see, this is a pretty good size rod, so the more the merrier here on this first guide here. So I like to take mine, I'll get a lot on my brush, and then as it's spinning in the dryer, I will even it out and let it just kind of cover it up. Once I get to a certain point, I'll kind of stop applying epoxy and start prettying the epoxy up. Remember, you want to try to keep your epoxy as even as you can get it throughout your build. You'll have less issues with it in the end if it stays really even. Once you get up close to the guide feet, you just want to make sure that you don't overdo the epoxy around the guide feet. If you do overdo it around the guide feet, what will happen is the epoxy will thin out and it will actually run up the guide. A lot of times we see guys, they bring rods in and you can see the epoxy that the previous rod maker put on it. A lot of times on this portion of the guide here, you'll see epoxy running all the way up the guide. I want to try to prevent that as much as possible so I don't have to remove any at the end of the build. This specific rod has guide feet that go to the exterior, the side of the rod blank. The original rod builder did not epoxy up to the front of the guide feet, so with the customer's request being to keep it as original as possible, we're gonna continue in that same fashion. Most of the time I would like to wrap my guides around the front of the feet, as well as put epoxy around the front end of the guide feet. In this case here, we're gonna honor the customer's request there to continue in the same fashion this rod was built in. So once I get a good amount of epoxy on there, if that's what I want to end that specific guide with, what I'll do is I'll hit it with my heat gun very lightly at the end, just to make sure that that epoxy is nice and even wrapped around the whole rod. What I'm doing here is just straightening out this end of the epoxy here so that it's even all the way around. Try to get a perfect circle there as far as the radius is concerned. And I'll take my heat gun. My heat gun gets pretty hot, so I like to do it from a little bit of a distance, but I just want to keep that epoxy up just a little bit so it gets really nice and smooth. There should be enough heat there. Once we get that epoxy laid everywhere we want on that guide, we're gonna take that, make sure we hit it with a little bit of heat and get any of the bubbles that we may have developed in the epoxy out. And then what we'll do is we'll literally rinse and repeat on every single guide all the way down to the tip-top guide of the rock. And once we get it all just like we want it, we'll allow it to stay in this rod dryer for about 8 hours. The two-part epoxy that we're using is an 8-hour cure. We want it to sit in that rod dryer spinning nice and slow all night so that epoxy dries and sets the way we want it to. All right, so as you can see, we finished our first 2 guides here. At least we've got the epoxy on it. It's still wet. We put a little bit of heat. With the heat, we've gotten out any of the bubbles that would be curing into it, which is what we wanted there with the heat gun. We're gonna go ahead and repeat this process all the way down to the tip-top guide of the rod here. And then we'll let it cure overnight again for about 8 hours. And then we'll come back and show you the final product once we get it dried up and cleaned up tomorrow. Hey folks, Cam here again from Ryuken Sport Fishing. We're back. It's the following day. We're going to show you the final product of that rod we worked on yesterday. So we let this rod cure like we had previously said overnight. It stayed in our 9 RPM CRB rod dryer all night. We got definitely plus 8 hours there. The actual epoxy actually cured very well. We ended up with very little blemishes. We're completely satisfied with the rod and the way it came out. We've gone ahead and wiped this rod off with a nice dry soft cloth. I prefer not to put any chemicals on my rod, especially right after we've cured some epoxy on it. Some rod builders may tell you to use denatured alcohol. I personally use a dry rag just because I don't want to put any harsh chemicals on that new finish. This rod is completely done. We're happy with what it is. We're going to pull it out of here and present it back to our customer here shortly. I just want to stop and give a thanks right quick to CRB Products and Mudhole.com. If you're interested in any type of rod building or any type of rod repair, they're definitely the best place to start. You can find any of the products you've seen in this video there at CRBProducts.com or Mudhole.com. And we just want to give a thanks to you for watching our video here. Hopefully you'll like and share this, and then we'll have some more videos to come shortly.